There was no way that I would ever have seen myself becoming a Muslim. Wearing a thobe, having a beard, wearing this on top of my head. You know, I grew up going to the temple. I'm sure you've seen those Hindus, they have that red paint on top of their head. I was one of those kids growing up. To think that I went from that to now wearing a topi in my head, to wearing a thobe, you know, to visiting Saudi Arabia, going to Mecca. I never would have seen any of that happening. No way. But me becoming a Muslim, it wasn't just a decision. You know, it was a sacrifice that I had to make in my life. You know, I want to tell you a bit more about that experience. You know, growing up, I think the only way to describe myself was probably a sheep. You know, I used to just copy whatever I saw on TV. You know, all these shows that I used to grow up watching, I used to think, okay, I want to be like those cool kids in school, right? In these TV sitcoms, you used to see popular kids and you'd see like the kids that got bullied, right? I wanted to be a cool kid. And I spent a long time just chasing those things, trying to be someone I wasn't. I wasn't being myself for a really long time. For years, in fact, I was not being myself. Trying to be this cool kid, as I described. You follow all the things you see, right? So, you know, you want the girls chasing you, right? You want to be funny and you want to be a bit of a class clown. You want the attention of other people, effectively. This is what you think it is to be successful or to be cool growing up. Because I fell into all of those things, eventually I ended up also falling into some hardships and making some silly mistakes in my life. They really, really caused me to think about life and to start thinking about, who am I actually? Am I being myself? Am I being authentic? You know, surely what matters is that you are being yourself and you're not lying to other people and trying to be someone that you're not. You know, I got to a point in my life where I felt so lost. Like, I didn't know what I was doing with my life. I didn't know why I was here. And I just kept going, you know, further and further down into this pit. And just feeling trapped and feeling like, wow, I really don't know why I'm getting up in the morning anymore. I don't know why I'm here. I don't know, you know, what am I even doing here? Am I just a waste of space? You know, all of these things just made me realize I need to figure out why I'm here. You know, I need to establish my reason for being here, and, you know, I need to follow it. So I guess you could say, you know, on this quest for truth that I was on, I needed a starting point. So naturally, I asked myself a few questions. And from those questions was, why am I here? Because not once in my life did I actually ask myself that question. Why are you here? What are you actually doing on this planet? Are you just going to keep doing what other people are telling you? Or are you actually going to do what you're supposed to do? So the first thing I wanted to figure out is, why am I here? And to do that, I needed to go to the places or to the people that talk about this, right? That talk about establishing why you're here. So naturally, religion was a path that I had to go down for that. You know, they saw their life and said, okay, this is why we're here. This is what we're supposed to do in our life. And so naturally, it was my aim to say, okay, let me speak to these people first. The same people that I used to ridicule growing up. So in this whole process of being lost, right, I'd fallen into being an atheist, right, and just not believing in anything whatsoever. And I remember every evening with my friends in the sixth form study room, two close friends of mine, one was a Christian and one was a Muslim. We used to sit and debate, and, you know, I would be sitting there saying, your beliefs are nonsense. God, all of this is just nonsense, it's rubbish, right? And then they would sit and tell me, no, you know, our book says this, our belief says this, you know, you should think about at least believing in God. So for me, the first thing was I need to figure out, okay, is God really a thing? Should I really believe in God? Is that where the truth lies? Throughout these back and forth discussions, you know, my Muslim friend actually gave me a book to read, and it was a bit of a challenge from him to say, you know, read this book and see if you can, you know, refute my faith or refute the idea of God anymore. But what surprised me is it wasn't the Quran that he was talking about. You know, he didn't give me the Quran. He actually gave me a book with the strangest title. It was called, you know, The Man with the Red Underpants. And it was a book by Sheikh Abdul Rahim Green. It was a book that left me perplexed. Right? After reading it, there was no other conclusion. There had to be a God. And I wasn't ready to say Islam was the truth yet. But after reading the book, I'd kind of said, okay, you know what? I need to do a bit more research. But in the back of my head, I'm thinking, wow, I think my search is just going to end up leading me towards Islam. This book, it brought logical arguments And as an atheist, I love logic. So these arguments were my kind of thing. Some of these arguments just left me just lost and confused. I thought, how can I refute this? In fact, the beginning of the book, it challenges you and says to you, if you're not going to take a sincere approach, then there's no point reading this book. And in my head, I'm thinking, you know what? No, like, I'm gonna take this book and I'm going to rip it apart. I'm going to find and show my friend all of the faults and all of the mistakes that this book has. And yet there must have been some sincerity in me, because I read that book and I was convinced about God after it. Whereas with Christianity, I have to say that not only did I meet the strangest people, but there was nothing that really appealed to my logic. It made no sense. I continued to hear the same phrase. Just have faith. Just have faith. It's a mystery. This concept, this idea, this Trinity, it's just a mystery. You won't understand it. You just have to have faith. So my friend used to tell me, just have faith and you'll realize that Christianity is the truth. And I remember quite rudely at the time saying to him, if you just expect me to have faith, then I could just write a book, or I could give my child a book and it could be, it could be about Dora the Explorer. And I could just tell them this is a book from your creator and you have to follow it. It didn't sit right with me. This idea that I just have to have faith and believe and not question anything. So at this point, I'd realized Christianity, it just can't be the truth. There's too many problems, too many holes. So the next thing was to try and practice Islam. As I said, I was on this journey of truth. So I learned how to pray. This was before I became a Muslim. I learned how to pray. I started trying to go to the mosque, trying to learn about the religion. I can honestly say to you that not only was my heart satisfied with the salah, not only did I feel like, even if I don't accept Islam, I'm going to continue praying because I love it. It just feels so calming, so relaxing. I felt so tranquil doing it. Every question that I fired at my friend or towards the Muslims, it was always answered. It always made perfect sense. Islam, the Quran, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? It all just made perfect sense to me. Right? It really appealed to my logic and to this intellectual approach that I had. When I look back at my journey and think about where I started, that question, why am I here? What's my reason for existence? What's my purpose in life? Alhamdulillah, Islam had the answer. I felt so grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the moment that I realized this is the truth. Islam, this is where I need to be. This is what I need to spend my life establishing now. My life purpose was established. So now I know Islam is the truth. But I'm not ready to become a Muslim yet. Because I'm scared. My upbringing, my background, the cultural pressure, the idea of disappointing my parents, all of this was weighing heavy on my shoulders. How did I decide? Between becoming a Muslim and disappointing my parents effectively. And when you care about your parents and you want good for them, they've raised you, they've looked after you from a young age, you don't want to disappoint them. Even growing up, I didn't have the strongest relationship that you could describe, between a son and a parent. But I loved my parents and I still love my parents and I want Islam for them. But I never wanted to disappoint them. And I really thought to myself, you can have a child who's brought up in the most misguided family ever, right? You could have a child that's grown up and their parents are part of the KKK or they're racists or they're extreme people. Would you not expect that child to look to do what is right? Would you justify their evil actions? Would you justify it if they decided to follow their parents? Would you say that they should follow their parents no matter what they're doing? No, you'd expect them to stay away from those things which are evil. So I had to separate the love I had for my parents and the worry of disappointing them from the truth. And I realized that the truth was the most important thing. Ibrahim alayhi salam, he asked his people, why they're worshipping these idols. These idols, they don't benefit you, they can't harm you. What's your reason for worshipping them? And their response was very unique actually, very strange. They said, قالوا بل وجدنا آباءنا كذلك يفعلون. They blamed their forefathers for following their religion for worshipping idols. They blamed their parents, their grandparents, the generations before them, and said, that's why we follow misguidance. My parents were just like the people of Ibrahim. They were just following what their forefathers did. That's all it was. So at this point, I've decided that Islam is the truth. So I'm ready to take my shahada. Right? I don't want to wait. I need to get it done. I'm worried that I won't see the next day. So I contact my friends and say, look, we need to meet up ASAP. I want to do my shahada. I need the witnesses there. Let's get it done. So following days, we go to a park. We sit down on a bench and right there and then take my shahada, become a Muslim. So that was 2015, 10 years ago. So this is actually how the journey began. This was really just the beginning of it. From there onwards, it was battling, a lot of obstacles to try and stay steadfast upon Islam, to try and develop as a Muslim, and to try and build a relationship with my Creator afterwards. You would not believe some of the stories that I have after becoming a Muslim, some of the things that I had to navigate through. This was really just the beginning of my journey. Now I had to navigate through all these obstacles and try and stay steadfast upon Islam. From having that red powder on my forehead as a Hindu, to becoming a Muslim and putting my forehead on the ground in sujood. I'm so grateful. Becoming a Muslim was the best decision of my life. And for some of you brothers and sisters watching, maybe you have a friend, maybe you have a colleague who's a non-Muslim and they need some guidance in life. The first question you should ask them to question their purpose, because that's where it started with me. That's where everything in my life changed.